It started as the happiest day of Clara's life. Her wedding was small, heartfelt, and glowing with laughter. As the reception wore on and night fell, her Aunt Eloise presented a gift wrapped in faded lilac paper. "It's been in the family for generations," she said, eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Inside was a porcelain doll, dressed in a tattered white gown with a lace veil covering its cold glass eyes. Clara chuckled nervously. "It's beautiful," she lied, trying not to offend. She set it gently on the mantel. Later that evening, while most of the guests danced or toasted near the garden, Clara returned indoors for her shawl. That's when she heard the soft scrape of something moving behind her. She turned and the doll was no longer on the mantel. It sat now on the windowsill facing the garden. She frowned, assuming someone had moved it, but when she asked, no one had. The joke, if it was one, didn't sit well. At midnight, the power went out. A hush fell over the house. Guests lit candles, laughed awkwardly, and waited. Then came the scream from the room where the doll had been placed. Clara rushed in, followed by her childhood friend Miles and her younger sister Ivy. There on the floor lay the doll again, this time facing the door, its veil gone, its eyes wide and almost alive. No one admitted to touching it, and no one noticed until later. The handwritten note tucked into the doll's sleeve. It read, "Do not forget what was promised. She never does." The room grew colder as a chilling wind swept through the broken window pane, despite the still summer night outside. Ivy shivered, clutching Miles's arm tightly. "We need to find out what that note means," Miles said, his voice steady but eyes wary. Clara nodded, trying to shake the growing unease settling in her chest. Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed through the hall, like a soft voice calling from the shadows. "She remembers," it seemed to say. The guests tried to laugh it off, but unease grew. One by one, they noticed strange occurrences. The doll appeared in different places, sometimes sitting on a chair, sometimes on the staircase. No one recalled moving it. Clara's Aunt Eloise grew pale. "This doll, it's tied to a curse," she admitted quietly, voice trembling. "It belongs to a story best left forgotten." Miles pulled out his phone, searching frantically for any mention of the doll or its origins. All he found were vague legends about a spirit trapped inside a porcelain vessel, doomed to wander until its promise was fulfilled. "I don't care about legends," Ivy whispered. "We have to get rid of it." But Eloise shook her head firmly. "Destroying it only makes it stronger. It always comes back." Before anyone could react, the chandelier swayed violently, plunging the room into darkness as the lights flickered. A heavy thud sounded from the far corner, followed by a scream that tore through the silence like a knife. Miles shone his flashlight toward the noise. There in the shadows, the doll sat, its glass eyes glowing faintly red, a sinister smile carved into its porcelain face. The nightmare had just begun. The guests scrambled toward the exits, panic rising like a wave crashing over them. Only Miles, Ivy, and a handful of others stayed rooted, eyes fixed on the doll, which now seemed to shift and move with a life of its own. "Calm down," Miles urged, voice firm despite the racing pulse in his chest. "We need to understand what it wants." Ivy nodded, her gaze locked on the doll's glowing eyes. "Maybe it's tied to someone from my grandmother's past. She used to talk about a strange doll, but I never believed her." Together with 3 others, they made their way back to Ivy's house, doll carefully wrapped in a scarf. The air was thick with tension, every shadow seeming to stretch and twist with unseen threats. Oliver, Ivy's black cat, normally calm and gentle, hissed and arched his back when they arrived, fixating on the doll as if recognizing an old enemy. Ivy pulled out a dusty photo album from the bookshelf. As she flipped through the pages, one photo caught her breath, a faded image of her grandmother holding the very same doll. Behind her stood a man in old-fashioned clothes, face obscured by shadow. Below the photo, a note in faded ink read, "The beginning of the curse." Miles read the words aloud, voice barely a whisper, "The beginning of the curse." Before the last word left his lips, a loud knocking echoed through the house. The basement door creaked open slowly, inviting them into darkness. "I'm not going down there," Ivy said firmly. "We have to," Miles replied, determination hardening his voice. "This is where it all started. We might find answers." With Oliver leading the way, they descended into the basement's shadows, the weight of history pressing down on them with every step. The basement was colder than they expected, the air thick with dust and forgotten secrets. Near the far wall, an old wooden chest sat covered in cobwebs, the same strange symbol carved into its lid as on the note with the doll. Oliver hissed sharply, claws scraping the floor, refusing to come closer. "We have to open it," Miles said, his voice steady despite the growing unease. He reached out, but the moment his fingers touched the lid, a chilling laughter echoed around the room, a sound so cold it sent shivers down their spines. Miles jerked his hand back, as if stung. The laughter seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Ivy tightened her grip on Miles's arm, eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" Miles swallowed hard. "Yeah, too well." Suddenly, the old man who had followed them into the basement appeared beside the chest, his eyes heavy with warning. "This place is cursed," he said gravely. "You don't know what you're dealing with. If you open this chest, be ready to face the consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Miles asked, trying to steady his voice. The old man shook his head silently, as if powerless to stop what was coming. Taking a deep breath, Miles pulled the chest open. Inside lay a yellowed, cloth-wrapped journal, fragile with age. Ivy unwrapped it carefully, revealing pages filled with tiny, cramped handwriting. "Read it," the old man urged softly. Miles began, voice echoing in the basement's darkness. "For those who find this, the truth is worse than any lie. The journal belonged to a woman named Emmeline, the doll's first owner. She wrote of receiving the doll from a strange man who promised happiness. But soon visitors vanished, and the doll seemed to appear in different places, always watching. Her final entry revealed the doll's dark secret. It was created to imprison a soul, one desperate for freedom. "We can't just leave her here," Miles said, eyes darting toward the doll, which now sat eerily on the chest, moving slightly on its own. Suddenly, the doll's glassy eyes glowed red, and a deep, chilling scream filled the room. Oliver growled fiercely, leaping at the doll, but the nightmare was just beginning. The scream faded into an unsettling silence, broken only by Oliver's low growls as he circled the doll. The glass eyes still pulsed with an eerie red glow. Miles gripped the journal tighter. "We need to find a way to stop this." Ivy's voice trembled. The old man said something about consequences. What if opening the chest made things worse? Before they could answer, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang, plunging the room into near darkness. Oliver hissed louder, fur bristling. A cold dread filled their bones. A tall, shadowy figure materialized from the darkness, limbs unnaturally long, eyes hollow and black, its presence suffocating. Ivy let out a terrified scream. Miles stepped forward, flashlight shaking in his hand, casting a narrow beam toward the figure. Suddenly, Oliver lunged at the creature, claws sinking into its shadowy form. A blinding flash of light erupted, filling the basement. When their vision cleared, the figure had vanished, but the doll still hovered, its eyes glowing brighter than before, and the journal slipped from Miles's hands onto the floor. "We've awakened something terrible," Ivy whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. Miles bent down, picking up the journal once more. "We have to find where it all started, the place this curse was born." A new resolve hardened in their eyes as they prepared to face whatever horrors awaited. As the last echoes of light faded, the basement was plunged into darkness again. The doll lay motionless on the floor, but the sinister energy clung to the air like a thick fog. Miles swallowed hard, clutching the doll tightly. "We have to finish this." Ivy's voice was barely a whisper. "But what if it's a trap?" Before they could react, the basement door creaked open slowly, inviting them to leave, or perhaps luring them into danger. Reluctantly, they climbed the stairs into the cold night air. Oliver padded silently beside them, his fur raised on end. When they reached the ancient church, its heavy doors swung open as if welcoming them back. Inside, the air was thick with silence and the faint scent of decay. Colored light filtered through shattered stained glass, casting fractured shadows across the empty pews. Miles's gaze fixed on a stone pedestal at the center of the nave, out of place, yet somehow familiar. "It has to be here," he said. Ivy followed, her eyes darting nervously. The doll suddenly felt heavier in Miles's hands, as if resisting. With great effort, he set the doll on the pedestal. A low hum began, the floor trembling beneath their feet. The doll lifted, spinning slowly as its eyes flared blood red. A deep, chilling voice echoed through the church. "You think you can banish me so easily? I am bound to this land." Miles stepped forward defiantly. "You're just a cursed toy. We put you back where you belong." The doll laughed, a sound like breaking glass, and the room was swallowed by a violent vortex. Oliver lunged to protect Miles, but was thrown back by an invisible force. The air thickened, squeezing their chests like invisible hands. Miles clutched the doll tightly, shouting, "If you want me, then take me." Suddenly, the world around him faded to black. When the light returned, Miles was alone in an endless field, the doll whispering in his ear, "You chose this path, now you are mine." Back inside the church, Ivy sat by the empty pedestal. Oliver curled up beside her, his eyes dimmed with sorrow. "He sacrificed himself," Ivy whispered, the weight of loss heavy in her voice. The old man who had accompanied them appeared silently at the doorway. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "to defeat evil, you must become part of it." Ivy hugged Oliver close, her heart aching, but her resolve hardening. "He can't just vanish," she murmured, gazing at the cold night sky. The old man's gaze was steady and grave. "Miles isn't gone. The curse traps souls where its power is strongest. But if he's alive, there's still hope." "How do I save him?" Ivy asked, determination flaring in her eyes. "The source of the curse's power lies beneath this church," the old man explained. "A mirror hidden in the dungeon? Destroy it and you sever the link." Ivy swallowed her fear and nodded. Returning to the church alone, she moved quietly through the dark halls, Oliver padding silently at her side, fur bristling with unease. Her eyes caught a faint outline beneath a massive cross, a seam in the wall. She pulled, and with a grinding sound, a hidden door revealed a narrow, damp passage. "Come on, Oliver," she whispered, stepping inside. The tunnel led to a vast chamber where an ancient mirror shimmered ominously. As Ivy approached, her reflection faded, replaced by Miles, trapped behind an unseen barrier, pleading silently. Suddenly, the doll slithered from the shadows, eyes blazing red. "You think you can take him back? You'll stay here forever," it hissed. Oliver sprang forward, teeth sinking into the doll's arm. The creature screamed, but held fast. Ivy grabbed a nearby stone and shattered the mirror with a crushing blow. The mirror cracked. The doll screamed, its form melting into nothingness. Miles collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. "Ivy," he whispered, relief flooding his eyes. She caught him in a tight embrace. "We're free," she said softly. With the mirror broken and the doll's curse lifted, the heavy darkness that had gripped the church vanished like morning mist. Outside, under a vast sky sparkling with stars, Ivy, Miles, and Oliver stood silently, watching the warm glow of their village flicker peacefully in the distance. "It's finally over," Miles said, his voice quiet but steady. Ivy exhaled, feeling the tension drain from her body. "I can't imagine what would have happened if we hadn't stopped it." Oliver let out a soft bark, as if to say he was glad it was done. They all knew the night's horrors would linger in their memories, but the bond forged in those terrifying hours was unbreakable. Together they turned back toward home, ready to leave the nightmare behind, but forever changed by the fight they'd endured.